Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Toronto Sports Rush Network. This is another Maple Leafs post-game reaction show. The Leafs have just fallen to the Carolina Hurricanes. My name is Kyle Andrew. I am joined by analyst and, of course, regular contributor to the channel, Pierre McGuire. Pierre, Carolina was clearly the better team on the ice tonight. Talk about that.
Kyle was amazing because if you watched the first 8 minutes of the game, and I know you did, it looked like it was going to be a heck of a night for the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially Willie Nylander. And then,
Yeah.
you see three breakaways in one period or two breakaways in one partial breakaway, and he gets a goal, and he's saying, this guy's going to rip it up. He's jumping through the gym. And then all of a sudden, Carolina reeled the game in. Good forecheck, good pace, limiting their mistakes, taking away space from the Maple Leafs in the neutral zone. And before you knew it, they were really comfortable in the game, and Toronto was not.
They certainly weren't. Berube had talked about the Leafs this morning in the press scrum, stating how he's loving the outcome, but not necessarily the process to get to some of these wins. It's far from panic mode at this point. But Carolina's forecheck was relentless tonight, and that's something the Leafs are going to have to look to as more and more teams are playing that relentless style of hockey going into the second half of the season. What did you see out there from the Leafs? And let's talk about the first line that they
Well,
missed
it
the
was a
cue.
tough look. Carolina gets last change. Brindamore knows what it's like to be an elite checking center because that's what he was when he played. He's got one in Jordan Stahl. And when you look at Jordan Stahl, Kyle playing on a line with Svechnikov and also Martinuk, they devoured Marner, Matthews, and Nyes. I mean, it was -6 for Austin Matthews. It was -5 for Matthew Nyes. And I think Mitchell was -5 tonight, too. So it's a lot of minuses for that top line. But I will say this, I do think Berube will adjust to it. I think the Leafs will become deeper. And the one thing, and I'm not making excuses for the Leafs, no Jake McCabe makes a different defense for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It really does. And one of the players that has to adjust is Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He moves from the right side to the left side, and it's a way different game for him. Way different game.
It causes them to play a totally different style of hockey out there. The lines are all over the place. Their positioning's all over the place. The puck movement's all over the place. They just couldn't respond to the pressure tonight. And the Carolina team that's been only 500 for the last month or so just won their second consecutive game for the first time in that month, but they look like world beaters tonight. And this is the type of hockey the Leafs can look forward to for the rest of the season. You talk about Carolina, you have Jordan Stahl, 36 years old, coming out and scoring a hat trick tonight. That's a very tough thing to defend against when the big guys on the other team are responding that way.
And one of the things that they've been known for since Rod Brindamore's taken over as a head coach, they go low to high. So from the icing line to the blue line, they converge at the net, and the point guys move to the middle of the ice and they get pucks through and they create havoc in front of your goalie. So if your defense isn't physical, if you don't establish body position in front, if you don't block shots from the point, you're going to have that kind of long night. And you see how well they tip pucks. Carolina is one of the best puck tipping teams in the league, and Jordan Stahl is one of those guys.
Yeah, their low zone movement in the offensive zone is really something to watch. They like again back to that word relentless that we hear about them during the broadcast, and I've mentioned a couple of times tonight. That's exactly what we saw. Now, we've discussed on these live post game shows before the depth of the Leafs, and on a night where tonight, like tonight, where the top line is not performing up to their normal standard, the depth really didn't fill in the gaps. I mean, they gave up a lot of goals tonight. We had an offensive outbreak right across the entire NHL. Must be a Thursday thing, but the depth lines, they didn't fill in the gaps, but it can't always be expected, can it? Your top line has to play like the top line.
Yeah, your top two lines, usually your top six guys. You're 100% right, Kyle, on that. And again, they didn't play great on Sunday against Philadelphia. They didn't play great
No.
Tuesday night against Philadelphia. They found a way to win. That's usually a sign of a good team. Tonight they were going again, and I loved your point about Carolina not winning back-to-back games for over a month until tonight. And that's a strange thing for them, especially in that building, because that building is electrified. I'm telling you, it's loud, it's really rambunctious. But what I see with Toronto is they're still in first place in their division. They still have Austin Matthews who's going to another level right now. You got even though he struggled defensively tonight, he's still going to another level. And they're going to get McCabe back at some point. This is going to be a good team. This is going to be a really good team.
Yeah, it's far from panic mode for the Leafs. It's certainly they're in second place in the conference. They get an A on the report cards for the first half from any angle you look at it. And even tonight, again, giving up the goaltending wasn't the problem. It was just a system wide breakdown tonight, going into, as you say, a difficult building and a Carolina team that's actually played below expectations. They're good. This is a team they could see in the playoffs, so they got a very good look at the depth of Carolina and the type of game they play tonight. Should that be a team they'd come across later in the year?
I think that's a great point, and one of the things I'm sure Craig Berube is going to do, along with Mike Van Ryan, who runs the defense, they're going to work on different ways for the defense to go against that aggressive forecheck. And part of that's going to be the forwards are going to have to come down lower and support. Defensemen are going to have to do a lot more reversing of the puck. They're going to have to communicate deeper in their own zone. This is all part of making your team better over the course of 82 games. They'll be able to do that. Van Ryan's really good at coaching defense. Ruby's really good at getting his players' attention, and I think eventually they'll figure that scheme out that Carolina's presenting for them.
Yeah, the Leafs, it was one of those games. It's rare in a loss that they have so many shots on goal. I don't actually know the final shot on goal total. I believe it was close to even, or both teams had a lot, which is rare for the Leafs in a loss. They typically get outshot badly when they lose games, but they did run into something of a brick wall in the third period in Pyotr Kochetkov. He basically kept their lead for Carolina in the third period, and again, like his counterpart Wall was fine. He was like he let in a soft one in the second period, but otherwise it's just system wide breakdown. But the Leafs, I mean, I don't know how far are we from Stellars coming back? Have we heard anything on
Yeah,
that front?
he's with the team right now, and he's
Yeah.
traveling, which is good news. And I think the more he's around, probably the more he gets on the ice, the more comfortable he gets, and eventually gets signed off, and he's going to be back. How long that is, I don't really know. Unless you're with the team every day, you would never know. But I would say the good news is he's there, he's traveling, and he's around the group, which is positive, really positive.
And you'd almost wonder if for Wall at this point, the shouldering the entire load for the team right now and not being certain of their backup role. They had two number one goalies before, and now he does have to carry the load. He could be getting tired as well.
He could, the one thing I'd say is Dennis Hildeby on Sunday against Philadelphia played a really good game. So I'm not as worried about maybe I would have been a year ago, but nonetheless, your point's pretty hard on it. I mean, the truth is when you have Stolars and you have Wall, you're pretty set up, Kyle. That's a pretty darn good tandem.
Yeah, and the lone highlight for the top line tonight was, of course, the power play goal by Matthews. But it was on the same power play they gave up a shorthanded goal to the best penalty kill in the entire league.
Yeah.
So it's a complete and total wash. But what can we take away from tonight's loss beyond? Oh well, there's just nothing. A bad night by the first line, and they just got outplayed on every facet of the game.
But again, I'm going to go back. Willie Nylander has been struggling offensively. He looked really good tonight at certain
Yeah,
points, and I thought he, McMahon, and Tavares were a real good line. I really did. I
really
thought
was.
they were really good. So that's positive. I see the energy for Connor Dewar every single night.
Mhm.
That's a positive thing. Johnny Tavares, I think, has been so consistent, especially when you consider what he was doing when Austin was out. He was really a catalyst through the middle of the ice. I see some really positive things with this group. Over an 82 game schedule, you're not going to be letter perfect. It's almost impossible, all 82 games. I would expect a big bounce back on Saturday night against Vancouver. Vancouver plays in Carolina tomorrow night. They go into Toronto. That's tough travel. I would expect a big bounce back game from the Leafs on Saturday night in Toronto.
You would almost certainly think so. They have three in a row coming up at home, then one road game in Montreal, which is not very far away for them at all, and then back at home. That's going to be a nice stretch for them to get, sleep in their own beds, play their own brand of hockey in their own building, and hopefully move forward through this. Because, I mean, if you look at the last six, they're 5-1. It's nothing to scoff at or be concerned about, but I'm sure Berube's taking back some notes to them tonight. Hey, we can't play like this again.
No, and the one thing I think he's going to take note of too, when you're playing in a playoff game and the other team's got a set plan to shut down your top guys, and they definitely had that with Martinuk, Svechnikov, and Stahl. You make sure that maybe you change in the fly. Maybe you don't just throw your guys out there and say play through it. In a playoff series, it changes. So I think Craig can learn from that too. A lot of film study for everybody involved in that game tonight.
Absolutely. Let's shift focus to the upcoming the rest of the season, the second half of the season for the Leafs. There have been some rumors about another 36-year-old who we haven't seen in the league in a couple of years. Young man named Jonathan Taves, and the rumor mill states that he might be a good fit in Toronto. What do you see there as a possible role for him with a team like the Maple Leafs?
Well, every time I hear about Johnny T. Taves, I get really excited because I want a player like that to be able to call his own shot when he's going out of the game and how long he wants to stay in the game. And again, having known Jonathan since he played at Shattuck St. Mary's before he went to University of North Dakota and eventually the Chicago Blackhawks, doing all the World Junior games he played in, doing the Olympic games that he played in, doing the Stanley Cup Finals that he was part of winning. I mean, I've known Jonathan a long time. This reminds me so much, Kyle, when I was in Pittsburgh back in 1990. Craig Patrick said, "We got a lot of good players, but we don't have anybody that's ever won. We're going to bring in a guy that's won." And he brings in Brian Trottier. Brian plays our third line center in Pittsburgh. He helped cultivate Yarmir Yager. He worked with guys like Troy Loney and Randy Gillen, our depth players. They became really important players for us. And Brian was there for two Stanley Cups and one President's Trophy in 3 years. It was unbelievable. Could Jonathan Toews do the same thing? The answer is yes. I believe he could. I really. That's why I think he's a great fit for Toronto.
And they would likely get him cheap because he probably just wants to get back on the ice in a city he'd certainly be comfortable in and in a situation where he'd be immediately walking onto a contender. This guy's won at every level. It's been a long time since we saw a player coach, but you would have to almost think from the behind the scenes perspective, he would be helping Berube in that sense, bringing all the victories and wins he's had to the table.
If I were Brad Treliving, I would utilize my players as a recruiting weapon. Austin Matthews, Mitchell Marner, John Tavares, all people that Jonathan Toews would know and respect as their talent. And, maybe even a player like Brian McCabe, who we would know well from Chicago. There's so many players that Jonathan would know. And if you utilized your players as a recruiting weapon to try to get them, you would have a distinct advantage over a lot of teams, I think, in the National Hockey League.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree. Let's check in somewhere else in the NHL tonight. It's pretty impressive. Sidney Crosby passed Joe Sakic for ninth on the all-time scoring list. We don't hear about Sid as much as we used to, obviously, but he's been steadily climbing that list. Talk about that achievement.
It's amazing. I watched the play. Drew O'Connor's a player that eventually scores, and you think about all the players that have played with Sid. Now O'Connor's not usually on his sign, usually or on his line, excuse me. Usually it's Ricard Raquel and Brian Rust. O'Connor was coming off a line change, and eventually they found a way to get him the puck. But Sid's been so good for so long, Kyle. You think how many guys in the history of the games, besides Gretzky and Lemieux, have been scrutinized through social media and all the
Right.
television and everything else as Sidney Crosby. Never one hint of scandal. Always the hardest working guy. Battled through major concussion stuff. Was there to help re-energize a franchise that almost moved to Kansas City. I mean, he's an amazing story. Kyle, he's just an amazing story. And to see him go to these levels, especially somebody that I respect so much like Joe Sakic, that's phenomenal. Not that long ago, he passed Mario Lemieux for the most assists, in Pittsburgh, which is surreal when you consider when Sidney was 18, Mario was his landlord. You know what I mean? It's a long time ago.
It's a long time ago. And to a point you just made too, Sid is actually the first superstar in the NHL we really saw that had to come up through the social media area. So the scrutiny on him has been tenfold what the guys used to experience. As the game itself has grown, he's largely responsible for a lot of the growth to put the game where it is today. So it is truly an impressive feat without a doubt. He's another guy that's played with Taves on the national level. It's
Oh yeah, no. Well, you go look at the 2014 gold medal team. You look at the 2010 gold medal team. I mean, a lot of stuff. I think Toronto and Pittsburgh are in different situations. I don't think there's a Stanley Cup on the horizon for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I do legitimately believe the Toronto Maple Leafs are a legitimate contender for the Stanley Cup.
And it certainly seems if they were to fill a hole, which they don't really have, they have a pretty complete, pretty deep team right now. It's a character guy, a leader guy, and a proven winner that they need beyond any single positional player.
Yeah, no, Johnny would be a great fit. Ryan O'Reilly, if he becomes available, I think would be another guy because he played for Berube in St. Louis. They won a cup together. He's been part of the Leafs. He's an Ontario kid. He'd be another guy that I think would be a good fit. But I'm biased towards Taves because we had Trottier in Pittsburgh, and I saw what it did. And I remember after the '05 World Junior, I was talking to Brent Sutter he had played with Brian with the New York Islanders, and Brent was a coach of the '05 and the '06 team. And he said, "Wait till next year when Taves is on our team." And I said, "Is there a player he reminds you of?" And he said, "Yeah, Trottier." And I said, "That's what I said on TV not that long ago. Taves is very similar to Trottier." And so it would be cool if that happened. We'll see. I mean, we're just guessing here, we're spitballing, but I think it'd be
Absolutely.
really cool. I think it'd be really cool.
I think the sentiment is shared by all of Leafs Nation and the NHL as a whole. Of all the teams rumored thusly, it would seem to be the best fit. So back to the Leafs. They have the next 4 games. You've got the Canucks, the Stars, the Devils, and the Canadiens in Montreal. Winnable games, but they're all going to be tough games, including a chippy Montreal team that always plays the Leafs hard. What are you looking to come out of if you're Berube? Like, you want to obviously win all 4 games. Is it realistic? What you really want to do there is establish uh, the correction for all of the errors made tonight. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. I think you're spot on, Kyle. And I think the biggest thing as I watch this, you're measuring yourself against teams from other divisions
That's right.
or other conferences, and it makes you see, hey, here's where we are. It's great for the general manager, by the way, Brad Living, because then you can say, you know what, maybe we're not deep as we thought, or maybe we're deeper than we thought. So there's good ways you can gauge your team, and that's part of why you play 82 games too, to get yourself ready for the big dance when it starts after the
That's
82nd game.
that's a great point, Pierre. At this point in the season, what you're doing is you're measuring yourself up against teams you're likely to see later, trying some line combinations before you settle things in for before the All-Star break, and then just hopefully continue this pace they've been relentless with up until tonight, perhaps. But they've had a pretty good start to 2025. Not too much to complain about.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree. You know, again, McCabe not playing tonight hurts them. People don't want to talk about a defensive defenseman, but those guys matter in a game like that because of how hard it is, the board battles that are engaged, the slot area presence games that are involved. So they miss a player like that. But I will say this: this is the most promise I've seen from a Leaf team in a real long time, Kyle. And it's not just Austin Matthews, it's not just Mitchell Marner, it's not just Matthew Nyes, it's not Johnny. It's everybody. Guys are getting really comfortable in the roles that Craig Berube has presented to them, and it seems like most of the players are really accepting the roles that have been created for them.
Tonight aside, as you mentioned, Austin Matthews, just one of the guys who's accepted something of a new role for himself, being the captain now. You have him that he's been tonight aside again. He's been playing a more complete game all year. You have Jonathan Tavares, who has just been incredible, stepping down from the captain role and then stepping up his play beyond. He's playing like he's 26 again. The Leafs look good going into the second half. It's tough to be a bandwagon, oh, start the parade, but this is the best they've looked in years without a doubt. And you have to take it all back to Berube and his system.
I really like what the coaching staff is doing. Maybe they don't score as much, but they defend harder. Their power play, I think, will continue to evolve. Playing 5-4s on the power play is a little different. We saw
Yeah.
them give up a shorthanded goal tonight, but again, I think that will evolve over time. I like the structure, the way they're layered in their own zone. And so I just think it's more positive than anything else with this group.
Yeah, there's a lot they can take away from a loss like tonight with a coach like Berube in the dressing room. He'll allow them to learn from this. He'll allow them to grow from this. And on the other side of it, with a coach like Berube, they could just end up being a better team going into this home stretch.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, everybody wants to say that they know what it takes to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah,
I've been down this road a few times. Until you've been there, you have no idea.
that's right.
And so Craig's been there and he understands. He's been there as an assistant coach. They didn't win. He's been there as a head coach and they have won. It's a little bit different. And where you find out it's different after you win, whether you're in the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference, when you win your conference final and you get in there for the first time, you're like, wow, I thought I knew what this was about. And then you realize you have no idea what it's about. So I think having that experience that he has helps a lot. I think it really helps.
All right, let's end on that, Pierre. Once again, the Leafs down tonight in Carolina, 6-3 in a game in which they didn't play their best. The first line was absent, but they're going home. Pierre, thank you very much once again for the analysis. On behalf of the Toronto Sports Rush Network, brought to you by the Bet Rivers Network, my name is Kyle Andrew with Pierre McGuire. Thank you once again. See you soon.